real pleasure to welcome Dr. Herbert Puchta, who will be taking us behind the scenes of the creation of some much loved course books. Herbert hardly needs any introduction from many of you, I'm sure, but he's a writer of course books and resource books. He's been a plenary speaker at numerous international conferences and has conducted workshops and given seminars in more than 50 countries. For almost 3 decades, he's carried out research into the practical application of findings from cognitive psychology and brain research to the teaching of English as a foreign language. And Herbert's latest course books are the forthcoming Supermind second edition for primary, the upcoming Think second edition for secondary, and Empower for adults. But that's quite enough from me. So Herbert, it's over to you in Austria to take us behind the scenes and let us in on some of your secrets. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Oliver, for this kind introduction and for chairing the session.
It's a pleasure.
Delighted to have been invited to present at the Cambridge Global Schools Festival. And I'd especially like to thank you, our colleagues, from all over the world. I've just looked at the chat box and seen the messages from so many different countries from, all over the world, basically, for taking part in this session. When I received the invitation for this talk, I'm just going to share my screen here with the slides. Okay, here we go. When I received, here we go, the invitation for this session, the key challenge I saw straight away was how to make it relevant for you. After all, as practicing teachers, which I assume most of you are, I was wondering, I mean, you want course books that I think you can trust, that work, and course books that help you motivate and challenge your students. At the same time, you might feel that the actual process of creating course books is of interest only to those who envisage writing one too one day. I believe I found an angle that will hopefully give you some insights into how my co-authors and I create our course books, and perhaps also help you see your own teaching from a new and interesting perspective. If you're not 100% sure where I'm going here, I understand. So please bear with me for a while. It'll soon become perfectly clear, I believe. At the beginning of the journey I'd like to take you on for the next 30 minutes or so was a young teacher. Oops. This was me in my early years of teaching, that is, teaching young teens. It's said that teachers tend to teach the way they were taught and not the way they were taught to teach. Meaning that when we start teaching, the most powerful influence on us is the way we were taught as learners at school ourselves, rather than how we learned to teach at university or teacher training college. Well, I'd learned English in the Austrian equivalent of a grammar school. So the concept of language teaching that I subconsciously picked up as a learner was that teaching is an act of transmission. Let me just see if I can get the next slide. Yes. Teaching an act of transmission, like what happens when the tank of a car gets filled up. As Andrew Johnson points out in his book, Essential Learning Theories, a book I enjoyed reading when preparing for this session, teaching from this perspective is the act of transmitting knowledge from point A, teacher's head, or the course book in our context here, to point B, students' heads. In this process, the teacher simply puts knowledge, such as lexis or grammatical forms, into the students' brains and regularly assesses whether the students have learned enough for the teaching objectives to be reached. Along with the development of the communicative approach that I wholeheartedly embraced as soon as it began to emerge, a new conceptual paradigm arose without me in those days being aware of this being a new paradigm, teaching as transaction. In that approach, teachers do not just fill up the students' empty brains with knowledge, but facilitate their active and more autonomous participation in the learning process. I began to see my own role more and more as a facilitator in my students' process of actively gaining knowledge and developing skills. I think that the idea of bees busy in their hive is actually a splendid metaphor for this kind of learning, not only because of bees' proverbial diligence and high level of activity, but also because, according to recent research, these very sociable insects can learn new skills from one another, and they demonstrate a remarkable ability to improvise and to solve problems. But then with age and experience, I began to rediscover, in my case, the vision that had initially motivated me, to become a teacher. And I'm pretty confident that you, or quite a few of you, will have had similar reasons for choosing this career. I didn't only want to be a good teacher, helping my learners learn English well. I had a deep down passion to go beyond being a language teacher and become an educator who would make a real difference to my students' lives as well. So finally, what I saw very clearly in front of me is what we could call teaching as transformation. In this process, the teacher is not only concerned with the learner's language learning and skills development, but goes beyond those and sees the students as human beings on their way towards becoming caring, responsible, and clear-thinking adults. And we are, of course, talking here about students being either children at primary or teenagers, okay? So teaching of transformation. Let's consolidate what we have heard so far, okay? We've looked at 3 concepts of teaching. Transmission, you remember the car or the tank of the car being filled up. Transaction and transformation. And each of these concepts, and that's my next point, each of these concepts of teaching is based on one or several theories of learning. Transmission is about behaviorism. In this process, learning is a change in behavior as the result or the outcome of instruction. Classroom action in this concept of learning will be teacher-focused, but not necessarily something with the kind of negative connotations that this term teacher-centeredness or teacher-focusedness is sometimes associated with these days. Teacher-centeredness can also mean that the focus is on a master teacher who is concerned with motivating each and every student, finding what's best for them, and helping them learn most effectively. Transaction is about a range of cognitive learning theories, from Piaget via Lev Vygotsky and Kieran Egan towards constructivism and neurological learning theory. Learning, according to these theories, is about a change in cognition and the creation of neurological networks. And finally, transformation. This is, as I've said, about the teacher's awareness of working with human beings. And the theories this is based on, the learning theories, this is based on, actually there are three, and they are humanistic, transpersonal, and holistic learning. And learning is transformation as an outcome of the learner's experience and reflection. These are, of course, all big chunk words, worthy, I hope, of the big stage, the big ideas stage we are on, and indicative, I believe, of the enormously important role that you as a teacher have in the development of the young and teenage learners you're working with. And connected to these big ideas, there are two very concrete takeaways for you. I believe, and that's actually takeaway number one, that the choice is not whether I want to be a teacher who practices teaching as transmission, transaction, or transformation. It's not, I believe, a question of which of the three. Instead, it is, I think, a question of when I want to use a particular approach with my students and why. As responsible language teachers and educators of children and teenagers, we cannot afford to ignore any of these teaching concepts and learning theories. They are all important, I believe. Transmission or behavioral learning is about helping our students very, very important areas of language, lexis, chunks of language, structures, pronunciation, intonation, and what have you. Transaction or cognitive learning is about helping students develop their thinking capabilities. Buzzwords such as critical thinking or higher order thinking are all around these days. Help them develop their creativity, help them develop their problem solving skills, their study strategies, and so on and so forth. And this all happens through interaction and the students' very active participation in the learning process. And transformational learning is about developing our students' understanding that we're basically not alone in this world. It's about paving the way for the understanding that the way we live our life matters, because each of us is part of a greater community with responsibilities not only for ourselves, but indeed for the whole planet and its people. I think this is an area of learning that is becoming more and more important in today's world. So that's the first takeaway, that we can't ignore, I believe, any of these learning theories. The second takeaway, I believe, is that course books are only great if you're talking about creating great course books. If you can rely on them to draw on all the concepts of teaching and theories of learning that we have discussed. And I've been thinking of a metaphor for this, and here is my metaphor for this. If I have one belief about the role that my co-authors and I have in creating course books, it's that we are in service to you as teachers and in service to what you wish to do in the classroom. It's in many ways like when you're having a stressful day and you've just entered the staff room and a caring colleague makes you a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Metaphorically speaking, the course books we create, and all good course books, I believe, have a similar function. They need to support you in your important educational mission and not the other way round. Let me just drink a bit of water here. Unfortunately, not coffee. In order to exemplify what I've been talking about here, I'd now like to share with you a few examples from the forthcoming editions, actually, that Oliver also mentioned, of our most successful course books, Superminds and Think. And I'd like to show you how these theories are put into action and the support you and your learners can get from that. As far as Superminds is concerned, I'd like to focus on the creation of stories. When we started on the second edition of Superminds and we carried out our research, the colleagues that took part in our focus groups or who filled out our questionnaires almost unanimously said something along the lines of, whatever you do, don't change the stories. My students love them. Wonderful feedback, obviously. So let's take this opportunity to look behind the scenes of the creation of the characters and the story plots. Stories have, as the educational philosopher Kieran Egan points out, two great powers. The first is that they are perfect tools to communicate information in a memorable form. We use stories as vehicles to get important language across to our learners. And we know that the more engaging stories are, engaging both emotionally and cognitively, the better for their memory. The better students will remember the language in the stories. This also means, of course, this is just an aside, that we have to select the language in the stories very, very carefully. The second power that stories have is the power to engage the learner's emotions. That's how they draw listeners in, and in our case, make the learners, the young learners here in this case, feel excited about the stories. So the language in them gets remembered longer and better, which of course would be a transmissional aspect of learning. The characters and plots of the stories, and there is a lot of research evidence for that, need to grow and develop with the learner's ages. And then there are other ingredients that are important. Stories for 6 to 8 year olds, for example, need a clear structure with a beginning, a middle, where some kind of problem or conflict arises, and an end when the problem gets resolved. And for this age group, we need a bit of magic, things that can't be explained logically, which, as many of you know, in the case of Superminds, are the superpowers that the characters, at least in levels 1 and 2, which are the 2 levels for 6 to 8 year olds, have. It is the characters' superpowers that help them solve problems, of course. With the help of these qualities, the learner's imagination is sparked. So they find it easy to identify with the characters. And here's one more aspect. The tasks around around the stories, engage learners cognitively, and so add transactional learning qualities, while, of course, transformational aspects come into play as well. Why? Because the protagonists solve problems by pooling their strength, their superpowers, by helping people in need, by accepting that they themselves with their superpowers need to act responsibly, and by realizing that everyone is important, whether or not they have a superpower. There is a lot of evidence from research into the power of stories that when students get engaged in listening to or watching good stories, stories that have these ingredients, actually contribute to their learning about the world, contribute to their understanding of the world. So this has been the 6 to 8-year-old age range. Now let's have a look at slightly older learners, 8 to 10. You know, those of you working with Superminds maybe, that the series of stories there is called The Explorers. And the protagonists are two children, Lucy and Ben. They have an old book that will lead them to treasure if they manage to crack a code. So you can see already here, we're not talking magic anymore so much. Here we are more talking about problem-solving skills, using thinking strategies, applying thinking strategies, and so on. In line with the story preferences of 8 to 10-year-olds, we developed this story as a fantasy. Fantasies are often about good fighting evil. So we came up with two antagonists as well. So we have the two children and the two antagonists, Zelda and Horrocks. They are after the old book as they want to steal the treasure. And in this series of stories in line with the age and cognitive development of the learners, as I've said, the story is not about magical powers anymore. It's more about Lucy and Ben being guided by a strong motivation to solve problems and to do good. So they are passionate about reaching their goals, honest, helpful, caring, and fair. And this is how they become role models for the children and help them in problem solving and applying their critical and creative thinking. Let's have a brief look at an excerpt from one episode. This is from Students Book 3. So you can see the quality also of the new animation. I hope your broadband connection is good enough so you can actually see and hear how well these new animations have turned out. Here we go.
Now, let's look for the first line of the rhyme.
I really hope we can find it here. Help! That was close.
Where did it come from?
I don't know, but someone is trying to hurt us. I can't see anyone.
Look, there's a knight with a sword. He's coming after us. Let's run.
Look, this is a good place to hide.
I hope the knight doesn't find us.
Shh, we mustn't make a noise.
I've got an idea. Hold the lead. Buster, come here.
That's it, Buster. Good dog.
Okay, and I'll stop it here. You can imagine, I think, what the outcome is going to be like, okay? So this is how a story, or a series of stories rather, for 8 to 10-year-olds gets put together, keeping the three concepts of learning in mind that I discussed previously. And now let's quickly have a look at a couple of examples from Think. Looking at learning as transmission first, we'll focus on form practice. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the number of teens who are in love with grammar is statistically pretty low, and they can find form practice particularly boring. But as teachers, we know it's important. Short drills with a repetitive structure can help learners remember lexicogrammatical chunks, and they can be transferred into the learner's own speaking and writing too. So we're talking transmissional learning here. So what we can do is actually use an acceptable type of activity that can help generate that transfer, and that's grammar raps, okay? So here's an example which uses very simple animation on top of rhythm and rhyme, as you will see, and I believe a rather bizarre and memorable story. The grammar focus here is on present and past passive, as you can see. This rap is based on a true story that happened in Montreal a few years ago during a magician's performance. The magician was about to do the famous cut a woman in half trick when a member of the audience, who apparently believed it was going to be for real, stormed the stage and attacked the maestro physically. Well, here's a short excerpt from the story in rap form that we have created. Okay, here we go.
Most of us like to see magic tricks. We love to be fooled by them. Be fooled, but every now and then, my friend, a trick can go wrong in the end. Here's a story they say is true that happened in Montreal. A magician's assistant named Sarah Fox was locked up in a wooden box. A box. The audience watched in amazement. How the box was put on two chairs. Now the box and Sarah will be cut in two, said the magician. Watch what I do. A man in the audience was terribly shocked. He ran onto the stage and grabbed the saw.
Okay. Obviously fun for the kids, great fun, I believe. Powerful in terms of helping students remember grammar. It's a genre of music that's very popular with teenagers. So what we're doing here is based on both transmission and transaction principles. As the psychologist Goswami put it, there is evidence that if learners are taught new information using a variety of their senses, learning will be stronger. Being a teenager is of course about wanting fun, but let's not be fooled. Teens also want to be taken seriously, and we need to engage them in talking about real world issues and human values, qualities such as freedom, creativity, fairness, love, tolerance, empathy, and friendship. And this is where the choice of texts is so important. We need to help our students get in touch with those important values and qualities through the texts we offer them. This text here is about friendship, for example. It's an authentic story about the friendship between a dolphin and a boy who is seriously ill. A moving story that is the starting point for a discussion in class about friendship, with students using their critical thinking skills to rank order what's important for them in a friendship before they talk about their different views. Apropos of choice of texts, course books these days are by no means just books, as we know, and texts are not just words on paper, printed on paper. A modern text genre is the vlog that you can see in all kinds of YouTube channels. And so we have decided to use vlogs in the second edition of our course book here, Think, to help students explore and develop key life competencies. So here is one vlog that I'm going to share with you now, not the whole of it, just a short extract. The vlogger, whom you can see here, is talking about the importance of apologizing, of saying sorry.
Sorry seems to be the hardest word. So, my dad loves this song. Sorry seems to be the hardest word from a very long time ago. And I think it must be true about sorry being the hardest word, that is, because my dad never says sorry for playing it. But is it really so difficult? I mean, we all make mistakes, even me. And nobody's perfect, not even me. For example, most days, I annoy my little brother, annoy my big sister, annoy my mum, annoy my dad, annoy my mum and my dad, make a mess in the kitchen, make a mess in my bedroom, make a mess in the bathroom, make too much noise when I close my bedroom door, make too much noise when I leave the house, make too much noise when I get back home, watch TV too loudly, play music too loudly. Do you need any more? I think you get the idea. So, saying sorry helps make this all better. Sorry, Mum. Sorry, Dad. I'm sorry, Ben. Sorry, Kate. That one is really hard, but that's all it takes. Of course, you have to mean it.
Okay, so after watching this vlog, and as I've said, it was just an extract of it, students do some comprehension work first, and then we engage them in various forms of critical and creative thinking. You can see the tasks, the analysis of the tasks here. And in doing so, they explore social responsibilities and reflect on this all means to themselves and their world. We started out by looking, I'm just before I share with you the 3 mistakes that coursebook authors need to avoid at all costs, let me briefly sum up what we've discussed. We started out by looking at the 3 concepts of teaching: transmission, here we go, transaction and transformation. We looked at the learning theories connected to them and how all 3 are important for our students, and why I believe they have to be key guidelines in the development of course books too. Finally, I showed you some snippets from the second editions of 2 courses of ours to exemplify how course books can support you in your important educational mission by drawing on the 3 types of teaching concepts and the learning theories we've discussed. And now the 3 caveats. And again, and not surprisingly, I guess, these are caveats for teachers just as much as for course book writers. The first one is, don't underestimate your students' cognitive capabilities, especially when their language level is still low. So often when activities are designed for second language learners, the attempt to make the activities linguistically comprehensible runs the risk of removing any intellectual challenges in them, learners are frequently disenchanted by activities designed to suit their language level, but which are way below their cognitive potential and thus fail to provide a challenge. Caveat number 2, when you call something a story, and when you use something in the class and you call it a story, it needs to be a story, including desires, difficulties, and a resolution, not just a compilation of important or useful language. I've been lucky enough, I must say, to work with teams of co-authors where every single one of us is a real story writer and not just a writer of language activities. And I think this is the right moment as well to stress the importance not only of the right team of authors, but also and especially the help, the support we get from our editorial teams and the research teams at Cambridge University Press. I cannot thank them enough. Caveat number 3, if you write for teens, there's no point just focusing on a bunch of the topics they say they're interested in. Instead, I believe topics and texts need to tie in with the psychological and developmental needs of young people. And coursebook authors need to have the in-depth knowledge that helps them select the topics and texts that will become the basis, not just for the transmission of language, as we've said, but for transaction and transformation in the classroom and in our students' minds and hearts. And with that, the mic goes back to Oliver.
Well, thank you so much, Herbert. That was fascinating insight and some very interesting lessons. And it's been great as following things on the chat box because yeah, your fans are out in force and they've enjoyed themselves a great deal. So that's just wonderful. And the questions are starting to flow in now as well. It's unlikely we're going to have time to answer them all, I'm afraid. But let's get cracking. There's a question here, what stories are appropriate for older children? Because obviously you talked about 6 to 8 and 8 to 10. So what stories are appropriate for children from 10 to 12 to prepare them for the leap into post-primary school and the language demands of new subjects?
Yes, when we're talking about older teens, there is of course a growing interest on the one hand in real life topics and texts, and I've shown one very briefly, the story about the friendship and this boy who suffers a serious illness, a very moving story. And then of course when you think of stories to use for teenage students, they have an interest in all these qualities that they need to develop inside of them, qualities that will help them to become responsible adults. I've mentioned some of them, tolerance and courage and creativity. So stories that are somehow that embrace these qualities are always great to use with teenagers. So rather than stories about celebrities, stories about heroes and heroines, people like you and me, who somehow have these special qualities.
Okay, great. And here's an interesting question. I wonder, and you'll know the answer to this. I wonder how long does it take to put a course book together with all the research and stuff?
Well, it's an easy question and it's a difficult one at the same time because it's difficult to actually say what is the start of creating a course book. It's not the time when you actually sit down with your co-authors and you start writing. It's a lot of research goes into the creation of the concept, a lot of reading and thinking and observing classes and talking to colleagues and talking to children or teenagers, looking at children's books, talking to teens about issues that are of concern to them, etc., etc., etc. That all forms, you know, part of the process of creating a course book. The action, and then of course it's a question of carefully developing a syllabus or the syllabuses, because when you think of our courses, we don't have just language syllabuses. We also have a thinking syllabus where we actually dovetail the kind of cognitive skills we want to activate in our students with the topics and with the language and so on and so forth. So this all takes a long time. And then of course comes research in terms of content, in terms of topics, in terms of texts, and then the actual writing, which I sometimes think is actually the shortest part. I've always used to say, well, it takes about a year to write a level of a course book, but that's a very rough figure. It takes much longer when you take all the other aspects into consideration.
Sure. So we can safely say that you never stop thinking about it, do you? Okay, just looking, we've got very little time left. I hope to get one more question in, because it seems very interesting. In addition to being a teacher, I'm also a music therapist. I would like to ask Herbert about the contribution of music in oral production. He mentioned a rap. Could he talk a little bit more about his experience with teaching English coupled with music? Especially,
yeah, I can talk about my experience. I don't claim any expertise in the area of music. I mean, obviously, songs, the right songs, are extremely motivating. Songs have power in terms of helping students remember language, especially, of course, also when we think of rhythm, rhyme, and tune. So all these auditory submodalities, they contribute, their memory anchors, metaphorically speaking, that contribute to the learning of our students' learning. And then we must not underestimate also, I mean, our students are often stressed too, you know, it's not just teachers only being stressed. But students children even can have stress on them. So a song also helps to relax, and it's also about relaxing together, you know. Songs have some kind of a unifying power in a way.
Sure. Well, I mean, and there's a number of other questions as well here. I mean, some of them, there is a theme, I think, that people are genuinely interested, you know, this idea of a course book, an English course book is a lot more than just the language syllabus. And you have touched on that a lot, haven't you? Kind of the cultural values and, you know, social values, so much more than simply a grammar syllabus. And I think you were very clear during your talk, you know, on how important that is when you're thinking about your courses. No, it's the whole thing, rather than, you know, it obviously has one objective, you know, overarching objective, but it can do so much more, can't it?
Yeah, and I mean, we must not forget one thing, that the more we can actually engage students by taking them seriously, by helping them to develop their thinking skills and their understanding of the world, the more relevant we are making for them what we're doing linguistically with them. And at the same time, and this is the huge advantage of such an approach, we help them make more of their cognitive and social and psychological potentials. So I think it's a win-win situation, actually, to go beyond language. Of course, our first and foremost aim will always be to teach them language well, of course, and will help them to pass exams and so on and so forth.
Okay. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Herbert, for sharing your knowledge and experience. As I say, the chat comments have been a sight to behold, really, really great. And that was, yeah, fascinating.